Print servers in federal environments create risk and unnecessary complexity. Every new printer, location, or policy adds strain to infrastructure that was never built for today's demands. FedRAMP High Authorized Printer Logic eliminates print servers with a secure cloud-native, zero-trust solution designed for federal IT. With advanced security, centralized control, and simplified management, agencies can modernize print without added burden. See what secure serverless printing looks like. Visit Vasion.com to learn more.
Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Trump administration is facing a new lawsuit after overhauls to federal employee suitability and performance standards. Four federal unions argue that the Office of Personnel Management exceeded statutory authority and violated the Civil Service Reform Act when it issued final regulations earlier this summer. Taken together, the unions say the changes will make it easier for OPM to fire employees. Here with the details is Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
For context, catch us up. What are the two final rules that are being challenged here?
This particular lawsuit is looking at one final rule. First up is a suitability regulation that was issued in June. And what this would do is allow agencies to apply suitability and fitness regulations, which are traditionally just for federal job applicants, and actually apply those to all current federal employees as well. And the change there would also expand the number of reasons that federal employees might not be found, quote, suitable for their jobs. So it seems to be just another way to kind of expand options for removing employees. So that's one of the final rules. The other one that's the lawsuit is challenging is on the performance management system, which OPM issued in July, and that final rule from them lifted a previous ban on a forced distribution system. So in other words, actually going to require agencies to cap how many federal employees can be considered high performers on a 5-point scale. It's gotten a lot of questions from federal unions, so now we're seeing sort of the culmination of their pushback against these rules.
When you look at the lawsuit, then, what is the core of its argument?
It argues that it violates, as you mentioned, the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978, and then also the Administrative Procedure Act, and says that essentially OPM is taking on too much authority over federal employee firing rules, and that it will make it easier for OPM or agencies to remove federal employees from their jobs in a way that they believe is illegal. And it would also, they pointed to a separate final rule on suitability appeals, where employees now, after a final rule from OPM, now have to, if they believe that they were wrongfully removed due to a suitability reason, have to go to OPM rather than the Merit Systems Protection Board to challenge that decision by their agency, which the unions, again, in the lawsuit are arguing that essentially makes OPM the hirer, the firer, and the adjudicator of the federal workforce process, and that's essentially too much authority.
And has anyone from OPM come online to justify the rules or the system?
Definitely. We've heard a lot from OPM Director Scott Cooper, and there were also justifications, of course, in the final rules for their perspective on why these changes were needed. OPM Director Cooper said that, for example, with the suitability regulations, where now they apply to both job applicants and federal employees, he says that it just should make sense that both the applicants and the employees are held to the same standards. The pushback there is that there are already disciplinary regulations for federal employees separate from suitability, so you don't really necessarily need, at least from some of the critics' perspective, you don't need both of those things to be in play. And then OPM Director Cooper has also talked about repeatedly this idea that there's inflated ratings of federal employees on the performance management side, that too many are rated as 4 or 5 on the 5-point performance scale, and it's there's just too much of an imbalance to be, in their belief, an accurate portrayal of employee performance. So that is the sort of the argument in favor of changing that aspect of things as well.
But none of those get to what I think is the crux of the matter, which is OPM as the hirer, the firer, and the adjudicator. Any explanation from OPM there?
The way that they look at that, and I will just mention first, too, that it's not just suitability, but they're also changing that process for removals or any other disciplinary action during a reduction in force or RIF, and then also for probationary period removals. So in all three of those categories, OPM, again, is serving as the adjudicator rather than MSPB. What OPM officials have said is that it's meant to make the process more efficient and not meant to erode any independence. That, of course, has gotten a lot of pushback. For example, on the RIF appeals final rule from OPM, 99% of public comments were opposed to that change. So there's definitely been a clear pushback on the changes that OPM is making here and giving itself that authority.
Drew, are they making changes in other places to the suitability and performance standards that might be considered along with these with this lawsuit?
So it really is just a matter of looking at those three aspects of the process that we already kind of went over, where the OPM is acting as the hiring arm for the federal government, working on the firing side of things as well, and then the appeals for that. So I think that's really the crux of this new lawsuit from the unions, where they're concerned about OPM taking on too much authority and removing a merit-based process for federal employees, making the system unfair against them if they do, for example, appeal one of those decisions. So definitely something to watch. Another lawsuit on the pile now, but definitely this is a big one here.
That's Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. Drew, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
You can find her full story at federalnewsnetwork.com.